Hello and welcome to Breaking the Cycle. My name is Alan Hyde, and tonight we are welcoming back a guest, Jessica Seidel, LPC in the Dallas area. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Exciting to be here.
Absolutely. So we were chatting a little bit before, guys. We're going to jump into a few topics, and as always, we're just going to see where it takes us. We're kind of going to pick up a little bit on some of the topics we've been having about motherhood, and Jessica and I were kind of kicking around, talking a little bit about some intrusive thoughts and the way that those impact us, and then some identity stuff as mothers transition into and after motherhood, having kids.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Very much so.
Yeah. And you were sharing with me, you have some updates as to where you're going to be seeing some clients. You still have Mind Squared, right?
Yes, I still have my private practice that's telehealth, but I'm taking on a new venture. I'm going to start contracting with an organization called Mindful Path Counseling and Wellness out in Flower Mount, and seeing clients in person out there. So I'm excited.
And out of curiosity, I meant to ask you this before we started. Could they find you on that website yet, or is that still in?
Not yet, but the information is on my Psychology Today.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Perfect. Man, I wonder how we could link that exactly, Chance. Maybe we could just put a link to Psychology Today. It's psychologytoday.com, and then just spell Jessica's name out. It's Seidel.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we'll also, at some point, we'll have Chance put the Mind Squared website on there, because it's Mind Squared
Counseling.
Yeah.
.com.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
So
intrusive thoughts.
Yes. So I don't, many of you have probably seen like the TikToks, right, of what it's like to have those intrusive thoughts. And so, you're bathing the kid and you're like, oh, they could drown, or, oh, they could, choke on the toy, or all of a sudden, I'll never forget, I was sleeping, my son was asleep in the bed and I'm like, oh no, he's rolled over and like suffocated on the mattress, and so then you've got to go in and check on him. Or you imagine these horrible scenarios of like awful things happening to them all the time. And it kind of wears you down as a parent.
Yeah.
And the ironic piece is I think as moms, we often think we're the only ones that have these. But in conversations with my husband, he has them too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Do you that's kind of part of the human condition, right? It's like, I'm the only one having this experience.
Right. And I think it's because I joke with any person I know that's becoming a new parent of like, especially, the moms. And I'm like, there is going to be a point you don't like your spouse anymore. Like, just going to be honest, baby's going to get here and you're going to hate them. It's normal because they're getting the more sleep. But we also, I think, take on as mom that role of being so overwhelmed all the time that we don't really think about our partner and the overwhelm they might be experiencing too. And so, he has the same kind of intrusive thoughts, especially like bath time. Like bath time is like a thing, because the kid's in water and you don't know what's going to happen. He's like, yeah, I just think he's going to like fall over and drown. And I'm like, right, while you're standing right there, you're just going to sit there and watch him and let that happen. And he was like, well, no. And I'm like, exactly. Like,
right. Yeah.
And being able to challenge those thoughts, right? We talk about challenging negative thoughts all the time. That's what an intrusive thought is.
Yeah.
And putting a name to it. I've talked to clients about, sometimes you have to personify the thought. And so putting a person's name to it even, or telling it, like flat out verbally telling it, stop, we're not doing that today, to get it to kind of shut down. Because I think we often feel like our brain controls us and not the other way around.
Yeah. If we pause there for a moment, personifying the thought, you and I, right? We speak the language, and I'm sure most people would follow along with that. But just for those maybe who are listening, who are like really interested in this, but may not know exactly how would you classify that in a way you would work with somebody like to personify that thought?
Yeah. So kind of in the, English term of it, when we talk about like writing and things like that, taking an inanimate object and giving it a person. And so, like my thought's name is Sharon, and I'm like, Sharon, we're not doing that today.
And my therapist's name is Sharon.
Sorry,
That's
Sharon.
funny. Yeah, bless her heart.
But kind of whatever name fits for you, it's a way to, I think, objectify something that feels very intimate, so that you can create space with it and allow yourself to not process that moment as much as your over anxious, overtired brain wants to.
Yeah, it makes me think of like the healthy spectrum of compartmentalizing. I think a lot of people hear that word. I know a lot of clinicians who would have a heated debate on the other side about not compartmentalizing. But I think in the right context, it's like, as long as you're not closing and cutting yourself off, but being able to put things in proper categories and like you're highlighting here, personifying the thought or the feeling to be able to interact with it can be really helpful.
Yes, exactly. That compartmentalizing thing is, I would, that's where I'm arguing. I'm like, technically therapists kind of do a little bit of it all the time.
Yeah.
That's our way of survival, I think, when we're working with, especially intensive clients. And so it's important that you're able to separate it, because I feel like it gives you power that you didn't realize you have.
And you know what I realized is I slowed you down on personification, and then I jump right into compartmentalization, and then we're just discussing it. Do you want to describe it? You want me to? How do you?
So I describe compartmentalization to people as I have a file room in my head, and for everybody I know it's going to look different, but like for me in my visual, it's a file in my head, and so I've got all these filing drawers, and this is going to stick here. And when we're working on this, we open this drawer, we work with those files. When we're done, we close the drawer and we move on to the next set of files we need to work on. It's not locked away somewhere. It's easily accessible, but it's something I'm not going to deal with all day long.
Yeah.
So what does compartmentalization look for you?
I think right off the bat, when you started describing it of the file cabinets, and you highlighted, the way I think about it is like when I think about it in the aspect of detachment. When I'm done with something, I'm done with that. It's not that the thing is done completely. I may need to revisit that, but if I don't file it properly, how am I going to know where to go back to?
Find it later. Right.
I like the file analogy you were using.
Yeah, versus like shoving it in a chest and locking it.
Right. Yeah.
Which is what I usually describe when we're not processing an emotional aspect of something. Which I think is very important. We were talking about Inside Out earlier.
Yeah.
And I think,
movie.
yes, very good movie. Didn't a therapist come up with like that concept, or no?
There's, what is it, the internal family systems guy that consults on the movies.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. And I think it does a really good job of visualizing how we will oftentimes not deal with an emotion to get through. And as well as it can be a coping mechanism short term, like if you've got to get through a tough meeting, or you've got to get through a family event like a funeral or Christmas or whatever the case might be, it works in short term, but at some point that emotion has to be allowed to come out. And if we don't, you see how it festers. And I think, I don't want to give spoiler alerts to the second movie, but it does a really great job of showing how when we don't allow ourselves to experience this emotion, to get it out, it essentially spirals itself into this, tornado, so to speak, and becomes out of control and consumes us completely.
Yeah, especially the picture they have of like anxiety spinning around, and then when Joy goes in and she's frozen in there, but her body is like
still moving. I was
like, man, that's anxiety in a nutshell.
Right.
And there's a lot of things from that. I appreciate that you were like not giving spoiler alerts, but one of the things I really loved about that movie was the integration of your identity with the good and the bad.
Yes.
Powerful stuff.
I would also talk about the perfectionism that leads into some of that anxiety. Yeah. It does a really good job of talking. It's subtle, so if you're not looking for it, you may not notice it, but the way that Joy kind of handles Riley's emotional aspects, I think definitely speaks to that, how perfectionism can lead into anxiety real quickly.
Yeah. So. And if you haven't seen it, highly suggest it. It's funny, it's cute, your kids will love it, you'll love it.
It's a great talking point with your kiddos. Like,
oh yeah,
I took my daughter, we went and saw it in the movie theater, and it's been a way for us to express emotions and talk about what they are, because I mean, I don't know about you, but I grew up in a family where we didn't process anything. You didn't talk about it. You definitely didn't share it with anybody, right? And I think there's a whole generation of that struggle with that. And again, when we suppress those emotions, they come out bigger and usually in way worse ways.
Yeah, you know, and it's so normalized, those things. We could have a whole nother couple-hour conversation. You and I are going to talk a lot over the years. I already know it, but there's so much in here. And, you know, it's interesting is what my favorite part was the sarcasm. I thought that was so funny. But I'm in this support group with men once a week. And one of the guys, just older gentleman, he went to watch Inside Out too.
Nice.
And he was so pumped about it that he went to watch it a second time. And it was just the cutest thing, you know, just we all relate to these emotional experiences. And sometimes we don't have a lot of information going around about it.
Right. I mean, we are often, you know, I always tell people like there is no good and bad emotion. There's only comfortable and uncomfortable emotions, right? But we often stigmatize like, you know, it's not good to be angry or it's not good to be sad or it's not good to, you know, feel a certain way. And so we essentially shame ourselves into having emotions. Yeah. And it, you know, trying to get out of that can be such a struggle for so many of us.
Yeah, it becomes a barrier, doesn't it?
Really quickly.
Yeah.
And so leading back into like that anxiety piece, it is a huge driver of all of your intrusive thoughts because it's the fear of the unknown, right? And it is going to, it creates that vicious cycle, right? We talk about like how thoughts affect behavior, which affects, I'm trying to remember my ABCs here, right? Consequences, and then it just, you have this cycle. And so when we allow those thoughts to get out of control, we are feeding this constant cycle.
Yeah. I'm going to do this thing. So there's the action, right? And then, you know, what I was helping a client see today too, and just tracking with you as you're explaining this, is she was on a roller coaster at Six Flags in California. And they have this one, it's called Tatsu.
Okay.
And you lay down.
Oh no.
So they come in and she's building this story. Her daughter was too afraid to ride, so she waited. And so it was her and her son, and they come in and the ride gets stuck.
No.
Yeah, like right as they're going to go into the port to unload. And so now she's sitting in this complete and utter powerlessness. You know, just complete unmanageability, complete powerlessness. Her daughter's over here by herself. You know, she's feeling woozy. She doesn't know why the ride is taking so long to pull into the port to let him off. And so she starts yelling of like, is something wrong? This doesn't feel right, you know? And then, you know, and then like a couple of seconds later, the ride goes in. And we were processing a lot of that, like anxiety and overthinking for some, not all, but for this particular client, it was the complete and utter powerlessness.
Yes.
Yeah.
100% of the time. Because, I mean, that's what those thoughts make you feel.
Yeah.
You don't think you're going to be able to fix it or change it or stop it in any way. Yeah. But it was like the yelling out, like the way that like, this is how I can control this in the moment is that I can try and figure out what is wrong so that I can fix it. Cause we can't always control everything around us, but the one thing we have control over is ourselves, how we react and how we respond to a situation. And I am continually surprised by how many of my clients find that to be this like golden nugget of information.
Yeah. That's it's simultaneously powerful to watch people latch onto that, because it really, every time it gets shared with a new client, it's like they've never heard it before, which is fun to be a part of. And also, like, I think about it from like the first time I heard it, and I think back to me at that time and like where I'm at now, like how baffling it is that we don't get taught these things.
Yeah. I've got a client right now that, you know, that's she's, you know, she reiterates, she's like, you said the only thing I can control is what I do. And so I'm taking control. And I was like, you go girl, like you got this. Yeah. And yeah, same thing. Like I think back to that moment in therapy, which, you know, I considered it like life altering, but he's like, you get to choose. I'm like, wait, I got choices here?
Yeah.
I have power and control over these things. It's life changing.
Yeah. You know, it's, It's always interesting too, because there's a lot of different camps when it comes to like powerlessness, and you've got the recovery camps where it's like powerlessness and that's it, and then you've got the camps of like the people on Wall Street where it's like we control everything, and the balance. The best place I've ever read it, there was a hair on the table, it distracted me. It's in the Big Book, and it says proper use of will. And I've always latched onto the simplicity of that, of like I don't have to control everything. Right. But if I'm just focusing on the proper ways in which I can control myself and let go of all the things outside of me, I actually have control of a lot more than I think in this reality.
Right.
All right. Not yours, not chances, but mine.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that. I feel like I'm always, having conversations with people lately, especially. And I don't know anybody's like religious affiliation is, but like God's will, right? And like trusting a path or something that's supposed to happen, and what you can do to control that moving forward.
Yeah.
And how it unfolds, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, I've always been keen. Like, I make no bones about it. If I'm pressed or asked, I've got crosses tattooed on me. I mean, I'm a Christian. I was raised in a Christian environment, but I've always been really keen to, as long as you have a power greater than yourself, I'm not invested in how you define that.
Right.
And I was having a conversation about like painful lessons that people will learn on a path of growth. And I think there's, again, camps of people who believe like this is like ordained and all that kind of stuff. And then you have the person who's been hurt by the thing and they're like, this sucks.
Yeah.
And
and like why would somebody allow such a bad thing to happen, right?
Yeah. And this is, I was kicking it back and forth with a friend who she's got a lot of support in her life too, and we were discussing it of like, it's not that your higher power is making those lessons painful, it's your improper use of will. Right? It's when you're trying to control all the things that are outside of just the lesson that's being taught to you. And then one of the ways I've always viewed it and described it to clients is like, in the beginning the lesson is like chafing or mildly uncomfortable. Then if you ignore it, it becomes annoying. If you ignored it again, it becomes painful. And then there's kind of that last tier, which becomes terminal.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's that thing that, I want to say haunts you, but creates issues for you long term.
Right. And I can only imagine too, and this is a good segue maybe into motherhood. It's like managing that for you. And it's like the one thing, like when I work with clients, is you have three things you can control in life: how you choose to feel about yourself, how you behave, and small children when you're rearing them until they become teenagers and then they're off to the races.
And I don't know that I would use the word control when it comes to small children. Just being honest.
I want to, that's kind of why I bring it up too, is I want to hear your take on it, because there's so much nuance in that last piece where it's like a lot of times it's like there's just a thread. And if you're not careful with that thread, you're going to lose it.
Yeah. So I've got a 7-year-old and I've got an 18-month-old. Two very different developmental stages for those of you who don't have kids, just FYI. And so, my 7-year-old, fairly independent, which is great, but she's also becoming like her own person. So we have lots of opinions about things. And then the 18-month-old, this is where I laugh at like control. There's nothing I do that controls that.
Sure.
Because they are these little human beings that have their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own plans, their own ideas. And that's why that 18-month period can be so difficult for parents, is that there's kind of starting to come into their own, emotionally, physically, like independently. But they're learning words, they're learning to communicate. And so they want to communicate like you do. They want to do the things that you do. And when you have a house with 2 kids and one's older, they want to do the things the older kid's doing, whether or not they can. And so that's what makes me kind of laugh at your control.
Yeah, it's so nuanced, and it's nice to be able to sit with someone who's in the lived experience actively,
Yes.
because I'll share those things like in generalities, especially when I'm working with dudes, because I work with a lot of men who don't have kids yet and all that kind of stuff. And, it's nice to have the nuanced perspective because it's going to come up at some point in my practice. It's going to come up for them. We all have to face this as we choose to walk with people in our lives.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And becoming a parent isn't for the faint of heart, for sure. Because you're raising a whole nother human being. You talk about you're making choices for these kiddos too, right? You get to control yourself. You're controlling the choices you make, but you kind of also have to figure out what choices are good for them to make. And it gets to be a lot, we talked about mental load last time, right? Like it gets to be a lot on the mental load because you're trying to do the best for them. You're trying to do the best for you. I ran across a quote, on Instagram today about how having mercy for yourself, because you're not only trying to create an environment for your child that is safe and healthy and, essentially different than what you grew up in, but you're also trying to heal yourself in this moment a lot of times. Yeah. Which means you're probably not being that quote unquote perfect parent in your head that you're trying so desperately to be.
Yeah.
And one thing I've talked to several friends about is that, and, I'd be really interested to hear a gentleman's perspective. So please comment if you watch this. But after you have a child, there's this kind of identity paradox. I don't even know if that's the right word, that you go through of who you are. And I've always described it as I feel like I'm in this alternate reality. With my daughter, it was really hard because it's nothing feels real. But you're experiencing it, but it's you're also experiencing it from a third party perspective. Yeah. Because it's so hard to describe it.
Well, it's I'm glad we're talking about it, because when you had suggested some of the topics tonight, this is one, I think, to identity formation at any developmental point in life, for us adults that are probably kind of at the point where we're past all the tasks until the next major ones come much later in life. These are important conversations, and it is hard to describe. The base I always start at is our I am statements. It's I am this political party, or I am this religion, or I am this profession. And learning those boundaries and detachments from those is what I am as a human being.
Yeah.
And I don't know why my gut, as I'm listening to you, and I'm trying to formulate a question here that leads in, is there's something about bringing another life in the way I've observed in people that I love, people that, I walk with in, just different sectors of my life that have children and have gone down that path. And, from a dude's perspective as well, I watched my best friend have a daughter before I had moved out here, and he changed a lot.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
It is. And part of it, I know part of it for moms especially is that there is literally brain development that happens as a mother to prepare you for a child, to help you be more empathetic, to help you handle all of these things. So you really are not, your brain is not the same as it was before you had kids. Yeah. And depending on how we define ourselves, your brain's different, i.e. you could be different consciousness, depending on what realm of conversation you want to go there. But, I think it also makes you face a lot of things that you may have pushed off to the side. It depending on what your childhood was like, depending on what, if you're a mom, what your mom was like, if you were dad, what your dad was like, it makes you look at some of those hard questions you had as a kid, or realizations. One of the clients I'm working with, it's, looking back at her childhood, what her mom was like, and then how she now has a daughter of her own and how she treats her daughter. It's this you're seeing your parent for the first time all over again.
Yeah. Yeah, the kids are our greatest mirror.
Yes.
Even when they're not yours.
Exactly. And it's a very hard place to be, and you have to compensate. I don't know if that's the word I want to use. For the dissonance that's occurring in those moments.
Dissonance.
Yes. Sorry. The conflict that's going on in your brain of the who I am, who I want to be, who I will be kind of situation. So.
Yeah. It's funny. My therapist had broken it down the other day. My heart has, over the years, it's like if you would ask me when I was young, would I entertain certain types of relationships, i.e. being a stepdad, those kind of things. If you asked me when I was 21, I just wasn't thinking about it. If you ask me now in my mid-30s, yeah, sure. One of the things that's really interesting about it that my therapist highlights is there's a shift that happens for young ladies when they have kids around selflessness that you don't see often occurring when they don't have children and they get up in those ages. So I'm curious, I see, I want to let you jump all over it. And I see you chomping at the bit. So I'm going to shut up. I want to hear your perspective on these things.
I laugh because I think back. So like my husband and I have been together 20 years. So we started dating when I was 19. So been together a long time, grown together. It's been a lot. And I think back to, I remember going out to eat with his family, and they are plate sharers, if you know what I mean. Like everybody orders, but everybody kind of like picks off of each other's plate. My family didn't do that. Like my plate is my plate. But I also, you have to realize, like, I am the oldest girl of, was there 5 of us? 5, because I have 4 younger brothers. So my plate was my plate because otherwise I didn't get to eat. Like, they're boys, they eat everything. And so I can be very territorial about stuff. And my husband's pointed it out in a few different ways in the way that, I've done things over the years. And it's so funny, you laugh at it as I'm literally sitting here, I think at dinner last night, and even today, and my son's like all over my plate, and I'm like, yeah, it's whatever, like just eat, it's okay, I don't care. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that had shifted for me, and I'm like, touche.
Yeah, things I would have never thought about, like from the male perspective. Is like there really is something so gentle about a mother when she steps into that selflessness. My therapist gave the example of, like, you find who you are when a baby vomits all over you.
Oh, amen to that.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, you do, because either you deal with it or you're also vomiting. Like that's really the only 2 categories that ends up in that situation. And how you recover from it, because now you're covered in vomit, the baby's crying, and you've got to get yourself clean, calm the baby down, keep yourself under control and calm to keep the baby calm because they're upset, they don't feel good, and deal with any emotions of like disgust that you currently have going on with what just happened. So
I think there's something it's so unconditional. Those who navigate it, and again, it's like nobody's perfect.
No.
And so I want to be real clear about like the unconditional nature of it when you're allowed to have some reactions, right? So if you're listening, it's like, we're certainly not talking about, again, perfection like we were touching on earlier.
There's definitely retching sounds happening. Like.
Oh, absolutely. And but to watch, I've never seen anyone get vomited on, but to watch someone in a difficult situation with their kids navigate it with grace is just, it's unconditional, and it's hard not to have respect for it.
Yeah. It makes me think of any mom you've ever seen in a grocery store with a toddler. Like, we've all been there. We've all done it. They're either tired or they haven't eaten or they're thirsty or, they're just having a bad day. And you're trying to get through the grocery shopping. You're trying to do your own thing and they're having the meltdown and you're like, oh my God, everybody's staring at me. How am I going to deal with this right now? And you're trying not to have a meltdown in the middle of it all. I've never experienced this or anything. And I'll go to the store and you see these moms and it's like, do I go over there and tell her like, oh, great job, Mom, you've got this? Or do I just kind of like let it go? But I always think like, somebody's having a bad day. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I have actually, I think I had a mom one time be all like, you're doing great. And you're like, thank you.
Well, it's
a
nice
little thing.
because I do think there are a lot of people who get judgmental about that kind of stuff. I mean, you know, society, you're always going to have both camps.
I would argue there has been a point, all of us in our youth who have seen that and been like, my child will never.
Yeah.
And you've eaten those words once you've had children.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'll wait for the day, but I believe you. Yeah. And I've heard from like anybody who's close in my life who has
Same.
kids, you know, you're describing situations and conversations I've had that they've actively gone through.
Yes.
So it's pretty universal. What would you say to the mom who is in the store and somebody comes up and has judgmental expressions towards that experience?
Try not to hit him, first of all. That's only assault and you're getting in trouble. I think this is where boundaries become really good. Of being, you know, that, because not even when they're not acting good, it's when anybody, I think, comes up to you judgmentally in any way. Yeah. That you have to set that boundary of like, you know, I hear you, but this is my kid. This is how I'm handling it. You know, I think usually a mom's response is like, well, do you have kids? As in like, have you had to deal with this before? Because either you're here to help me or you can just kind of go away. Like, I don't have time for this right now. Because it's too much because you're already overwhelmed in the store trying to deal with the kiddo. And so it's one of those where I always come back to like, it never hurts to be kind.
Sure.
You know, and if it's that frustrating for you to be in a grocery store and hear a kid crying, what is it about the kid that's stressing you out?
Yeah. What does that say about you?
Yeah. You know, are you stressed because you're empathizing with this child's distress and you want it to stop because it makes you so uncomfortable? Because it's what I'd probably argue that it is. Or because you see it as this like inconvenience in some way. And really, how is it inconveniencing you if they're not stopping you from shopping?
Right.
So.
Yeah, and this is where we could go round and round and round on this one because there's so much truth to what you just stated. Like when you're out in public and someone has a judgment towards what you're doing, and you're not harming anybody. I always tell my clients like someone could come up to me and say you're an a-hole, you know, and it's not personal, you know, because especially if I've been taking my inventory in my life and treating people properly, if someone has a judgment that is hurtful, you know, it's remembering like. Either I am and I need to clean that up, right? Or it's just not personal. They're allowed to believe whatever they want.
Yeah. And thank you for the perspective. Like that, there's a good response if you're ever looking for anything is that's your opinion. Okay.
Yeah. We use this one in the support circles I'm in where we say, you may be right.
Yeah, exactly.
In my mind, you may not be. But
that's usually where I'm like,
right.
You're not wrong. I don't know. I think the overall is that it's a lot to be a parent in any situation, you know, whether you've given birth to children, whether you've adopted children, whether you've taken on children to help support other family members. It's hard work. Like you're raising another human being. You're trying to raise another human being. You're trying to maintain your own mental health. You're trying to create a stable household, right? Be financially stable and whatever that is. And you're wearing so many different hats all the time. It is easy. It's a cop out, I would say, to judge parents in their, imperfections. And it's harder to sit with them in them instead. And what could that look like as a society if all of us parents and individuals just supported one another in our struggles?
Community, right? Yeah. It's such a, I've never had a client that's come across my therapy chair where I haven't tried to help them find some form of community. Mm-hmm. It's already hard enough out there for everybody, and we all have our unique struggles. And so finding people who are going to be that for you, it's like I pitch that until the cows come home.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's research shows why group therapy is so effective, right?
Yeah.
Is because, none of us want to be alone. I remember in grad school that being kind of the key takeaway is that, like, we all want to be seen. And the more we can help each other be seen, the easier it is to connect. And when we connect, right? So Brene Brown, like, when you're connecting, you're not disconnecting, right? And we're building relationships that way and building understanding. And it's a vital thing to community, but also to society.
Yeah, which I think circles back to one of the things I wanted to ask you about is in our formation of our identity, right? And getting your perspective on the formation of the new identity that forms when you step into motherhood, that juncture of like healthy boundaries helping us and assisting us to do that.
No. That's another fun part of parenthood. Because when you become a parent, you don't become a parent in a vacuum. There are family traditions that walk in. There are parents, healthy or not, walking in. There's other family members that, are a part of it because it's a family. And you have this idea of who you want to be based on either who your parents were, because you want to be like them, or who they were and you don't. And so, and then sometimes to the detriment, you're trying so hard not to be like them, you end up like them in some ways anyway. Yeah. Right. And that's a whole nother topic. But kind of what you made me think about is the boundary you even have to set for the family in who you are as a parent. Because especially if you are that parent trying not to be like yours, there's that conflict that comes in, and here you're trying to do all of this and you're constantly being told it's wrong. Yeah. Right. Or they're usurping your parenting techniques or your parenting authority, whatever term you want to use there. And it makes it hard to know if you're making the best decision for your kid.
When you say there, are you talking about the partner or parents?
Both sometimes, yeah. Depending on, your scenario, because let's face it, there's 100 of different ones you could go with. Yeah. And it's one of the hardest parts of your identity to come up with because it's holding it. It's giving space for it, and one of the things, so for example, one of the things that my husband and I talked about, and really I talked to him, anyway, was that when, our daughter was born, is that like social media and pictures, right? Like allowing her a chance to have her own identity outside of social media. And then hugging. So I'm a big child abuse prevention background. And one of the number one things to help prevent that is body autonomy. And so not forcing upon physical touch. Yeah. And this is a very hot topic, especially here in Texas, and respect. It's a whole thing. But it was, I'm never going to make my child give you a hug when they're not comfortable with it. Right. And having to set that boundary because this is who I want to be as a parent. This is the line I want to draw. This is the autonomy I want to give my child. And then constantly fighting for it. Yeah. To maintain the identity.
And what is it's perfect because I was just like right there with you is what is the identity? And it does, you and I know we could go into so many branches, as you can too, listening along. How would you define it?
I mean, for me, it's being the safety for my child. Children don't really get to have a voice for themselves. Unfortunately, I think we're getting a lot better. Bluey being a great example of that.
Bluey.
But, historically, children have not had a voice, and children really haven't been allowed to talk. And so respecting her thoughts or their thoughts and feelings, now I have two of them, and being the safety they can come to with all of those. Yeah. And letting them know that I'm always going to be on your side. And that can be hard when you have family members that are contradicting that sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
And Bluey is a cute little blue dog for those following along, not to be confused with Blue's Clues. It's just this generation of blue dog. I don't know. What do you think that is? People love blue dogs, man.
You know, I don't really know. I was not a Blue's Clues kid. Sorry, y'all. But I've definitely gotten into Bluey. So it's, for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, it is a cartoon that comes out of Australia that are these dogs. They're all dogs. It's an entire like community of dogs. And it's a family unit. And it's essentially, I joke, it's a parenting show that kids like to watch.
And that's not to be confused with like Paw Patrol, right? These are all different shows about dogs, right?
Yes, yeah. Paw Patrol is more about teaching like teamwork and helping others, and they go and rescue people. Bluey is just a family unit kind of getting through the daily life. You know, my husband jokes that like Bandit, who's the dad, like sets unrealistic expectations of how we play with our children. But it is one of those that like you have to kind of decide what parent you want to be and then sticking with it. Well,
I like that you circled back because you had said something really important about being the safety for our children, while also it's kind of like even how we would maybe describe boundaries sometimes of like protection and containment.
Yes.
Right. And now I've kind of got to grab some little humans and contain them and protect them. And now there's moving parts. And now all of a sudden the parents are behind me. I'm like, how the fuck did you get back there?
Exactly, right? And so you're on guard, and you know, for some of us that can be very triggering. You know, I've got a client in particular, like, you know, mom is a trigger, and it's one of those that it makes it hard to know who you are all the time, or trust who you are all the time. Because I think as parents, part of that intrusive thoughts, we always second guess our decisions, even after we've made them, after we've decided this is what we're doing. You're like, was that the best idea? And just hope it is moving forward.
Yeah. Without this, I think is a big part. Just as I'm conceptualizing and listening and hearing you, is like that's another big piece of making sure we don't become our caregivers. You know, seeing the. You know, when we set those boundaries, and I'm sure you would agree with this, is like we in those moments get to see what we didn't like and what we do like about the way we were raised, and what we probably did like were those abilities at times to set the limit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You know, there's a parenting curriculum called Nurturing Parenting, and I taught it for several years.
Nurturing Parenting?
Nurturing Parenting, yeah. It also has a unit called Nurturing Fathers. But one of the sections it talks about is what it asks the parents the question of what is a memory you have of spending time with your family that you remember the most, and why is that important? And it's profoundly all of these quiet moments that we often have with our parents. And, you know, in teaching classes, it's, oh, you know, I liked getting to come down in the morning and sit with mom at the breakfast table, or you know, it's all of these connecting moments. And I think, you know, when you talk about like the things you want to take away from it, those are oftentimes the things we're trying to, I think, to recreate as a parent. The struggle sometimes though is the generation. You know, I think to my daughter of like, all these moments I want to create with her and let her experience them as I did. And in becoming a parent, I realized like, I grew up, my grandparents were well off enough. They bought a house on the lake and they lived in the woods. And so that song of like, over the hill and through the woods to grandmother's house we go. I thought everybody's grandma lived in the woods. Watching Charlie Brown and realizing his mom lived in a condo rocked my world.
Yeah, mine lived in a trailer park.
Exactly, right? And so like, realizing my daughter's not really going to get to have the moments of spending 4th of July on the lake, popping fireworks in the sand, or, you know, running down and getting to have that piece. Like her experience with her grandparents, my parents, is going to be different because they're in the house I grew up in, right? And what that gets to be like for her, and how can I create what the values are that I learned in those moments instead of having that exact moment recreated.
Yeah. While also navigating being her safety and the safety for an 18-month-old, and being a wife that doesn't want to beat up her husband, and going to work and doing this podcast.
Hashtag mental load.
Yeah. Well, it's such a rich discussion, and I know we're kind of at the end. So for those who've been following along with Jessica and I's discussion, she's going to be on again. We were discussing, Jessica's going to come on and she's going to sit on a panel discussion the first Friday in September. As we get closer, I'll be posting that everywhere. We're going to get a few other clinicians who are going to come in and discuss certain topics, and I'll mold that around to kind of play to your guys' strengths and hear your guys' perspectives for the benefit of the audience. But and we'll be having Jessica on again. I feel like this is a topic we're just going to have to continue just flesh this out.
Yes. Parenting is a very complex situation that we all find ourselves in, because one, we're human, and also because love is complicated. I had a friend post something the other day about love being easy, and I was like, I think love is always hard work. Like, it always takes work to love somebody. And it's in that work that we kind of discover, those that are really important to us, because love is hard. If it's important to us, we'll take the time to do the hard work.
Yeah.
And in that, you find who truly cares about you.
Yeah. And who's willing to walk with you as you truly navigate the ups and downs of providing that to yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. So. Let's utilize Chance for a moment. Hello, brother. Our producer, Chance. So Jessica also writes blogs.
I do.
I've read a few of them. I love them. We talked about them in the first episode. You can find that on YouTube. In the descriptions on Facebook, we link to the YouTube. You can find that first episode where we go over some of Jessica's blogs. Mm-hmm. Remind me the website, and we can have Chance put that in there if they wanted to read some of your blogs.
Yes. So it's Plaid for Women.
PLAID?
Yes.
Yeah.
.com, I think is the website. We're actually, I'm trying to remember what the September article reference is, because I've got some writing I need to be doing to get caught up with that. That's also something I will probably be doing with the new, with mindfulness, or mindful path, counseling and wellness as well. So
yeah.
More to come.
Very cool. And one more thing, Chance. Jessica's main website is mindsquaredcounseling.com.
Yes.
Oh, you're the man. Thanks again. Huge thanks, Chance, to all your help on the background there. Jessica, what a pleasure to just have you come on. I really appreciate you coming on tonight and furthering this conversation.
Yes. Thank you so much. Really enjoy getting to talk with you and teach all of y'all, hopefully, something new.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Lots of great knowledge tonight. We break the cycle together. We love you. We're here every Friday, 7 p.m. We'll see you next week.